This is a revision presentation on the shape of the marginal cost curve. Start with the definition for marginal cost. We define marginal cost as being the cost of producing just one extra unit of output. So we're only considering here the additional cost added on by the extra production. Let's illustrate this with a numerical example. If you look at the table below, when we take our first unit of output and we see that our total cost of that was 200, the marginal cost is the cost that we added through adding that first unit of output. Now, before we started production, costs would have been 0. So the extra cost added is just the 200 cost that we've got to start with. Then if we go to our second unit of output, well, now we see that total costs have gone up to 300. So we ask ourselves, what was the change in total costs from adding that extra unit of output? Well, it's gone from 200 to 300. So that gives us a marginal cost of that second unit of output of 100. We've added on an extra £100 of cost through the increase in output. And then as we add on our third unit of output, now total costs have increased to 600. And again, we just considered the costs that have been added on by that one extra unit. So we've gone up from 300 to 600. And so the change was the additional cost, that's the marginal cost of 300, gone up from 300 to 600. Now, what is the typical shape of a marginal cost curve? Now, I've got for you here on the left-hand side the kind of units that we're going to be using in numerical information, and we're just going to plot these out in terms graphically on the graph. And what we tend to see is that the marginal cost is basically U-shaped. First we see marginal costs falling, and then marginal costs start to increase at higher levels of output. And this gives us a kind of tick or kind of U-shape to our typical marginal cost curve. Now, why do we get the marginal cost curve in this shape? Well, what's going on with our marginal cost curve is that at first we are benefiting from increasing returns to scale. But then at these higher levels of production, we start to suffer instead from diminishing marginal returns. The diminishing marginal returns mean that actually now we're going to have increased marginal costs. We've got some kind of fixed factors of production in the short run. If we're adding more workers, then we're constrained by our factory space, and that means that actually the factory is getting too crowded, and that's actually increasing the cost of each extra unit of production that we're adding. Now notice here we're keeping the distinction all the way through between the marginal cost, the cost of the extra output, and what we call our average costs. But there is an important relationship between marginal costs and average costs that you need to know about. And particularly when we draw the curves, you need to ensure that your marginal cost curve, which is our red curve, is going through the bottom of our blue U-shaped average cost curve. Now, why does this happen? Well, consider the point to the left of where they cross. Now what we've got is that the marginal cost of each unit of production that's being added on is less than the already existing average cost. So each new unit of production that's being added is actually below the current average cost, so we expect average costs to be falling. You can think of this if you added someone who wasn't very clever to your house. What would happen to the average results? Well, if the person that you add is less clever than the average intelligence of your house, then you'd expect your average results to come down. But then what starts happening when marginal costs start becoming higher than average costs? Well, now we've got the opposite story. Now instead here, the new unit of production we're adding is above the current average cost. And so now the average cost will start increasing as we add those new units of production. Think of this as you added an academic scholar to your house. They're going to be clever than the average person in your house, and so you expect the average intelligence of the average results to go up from adding an academic scholar. So while our marginal costs are below the average cost, we expect average costs to fall. While marginal costs are above the average cost, we expect average costs to be increasing. So when are they equal? Well, the marginal cost curve crosses through the bottom of the average cost curve.